Understanding nuance is legit going to save the world. What's good, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Toby Talk here on the Toby Network. If you're new to the Toby Talk, welcome. My name is Toby, and in this series here on the channel, the Toby Network, I basically talk about things that I've experienced, that I'm seeing. This is basically the series where I talk my shit. Okay, that's what I do. What I do. It's not really video essays, it's just me talking. And if you pay attention, you'll probably learn some insightful shit. So, yeah. So, if you're new here, welcome. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode with others. And let's get into the Toby Talk for today, which is going to be all about nuance and how, in order for us to kind of not just survive, but thrive through everything that's going on and beyond, we're going to have to start understanding and practicing nuance. So, first things first, before we even get into it, let's just do a brief definition on nuance because I find nuance to be a popular buzzword that's thrown about today in a lot of digital discourse and social political discourse, especially in liberal spaces and intellectual spaces. And it's just used in so many different ways that it tends to feel empty, and people tend to be like, well, what the fuck really is nuance? So let's talk about nuance. Now, this isn't going to be no Oxford definition, no Webster, no Merriam Wonders, whatever her name is. Y'all know, starts with the MW, whatever it is. This ain't going to be that. If you want the textbook definition of nuance, you can easily just Google it, right? Pause, open up the tab, Google. Yeah, yeah. Okay, you can just easily do that. So if you want, do that. But this is basically going to be a kind of brief summary of what nuance means. So nuance is basically a concept that talks about how there are variations and differences in something like a sound, a tone, a meaning, a conversation that are often subtle and not obvious, but that impact and even make the meaning of something or the sound, the tone, the taste more complex. Okay? So nuance is variations and differences that change the meaning or tone or taste of something. And these variations and differences are often not explicitly obvious, but they do matter because they do color and change the meaning, the taste, the tone, etc. of the thing that is being discussed. All right? One way that I like to really think about nuance is like intersectionality. So shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw for intersectionality. So if you don't know what intersectionality is, Google it. Right? But that's one way that I like to think of nuance when it comes to the concept of like intersectionality. Okay. And oftentimes we hear people talk about nuance when they say, two things can be true at once, right? It's not just simple, it's not just black and white. Two things can be true at once. When they say that, they're talking about nuance. And we're going to get back to that whole notion of two things can be true at once later on in this episode. But yeah, now that we got the definition of nuance out there, let's talk about how did nuance become so popular? Because she seems like she's the it girl. Every couple of years, people come up with a new favorite buzzword that they love to use in social, political, and internet discourse. And it seems like Nuance is the girl right now. Or at least she's been the girl for a minute. Maybe she's on her way out. I don't know. Hopefully she's not. But how did she become so popular? Let's talk about it. Now again, this is not a video essay on how did nuance become so popular and become a thing in social political zeitgeist and blah 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 blah. No, this ain't no video essay. I ain't got the time, the drive, or ambition to give y'all a video essay. This is just me talking from my observations and my thoughts. This is just that. So please keep that in mind. Please keep that in mind. But I be peeping a lot because I'm a psychic, so and I'm an intellectual, so But that's what this is. Okay. 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 So currently, we hear about nuance all the time. And I find that when people utilize it, they just utilize it as another politically empty buzzword, right? And that's problematic because nuance is a word that has so much meaning, not just in its understanding, but in its practice. And it's a word, it's a concept that has so much value and that is really needed in its authenticity, in its truth. It's really needed in today's society. Like, we're starving. We're starving and we need it. Nuance is the bread and butter and the water that we need. We need. Okay? Now, according to my observations, I feel like nuance started to gain more popularity on social media and among liberal spaces, the intellectual, both the actual authentic intellectual as well as the pseudo intellectual spaces, because both are true, both exist, and there are differences. Around perhaps maybe the late 2000s or 2010s, right, into where we come. And I think it's because of the whole movements that were going into the 2010s where people were becoming more liberal. It was becoming more popular to be liberal, right? And when I say popular to be liberal, I'm talking about more so popular to be liberal outwardly, not necessarily as an actual practice. It was popular to be like, yeah, I am a feminist. Yeah, of course Black Lives Matter, although with that, Lord, there was still the counteraction with all lives matter, and even though in certain sectors it was more popular to say Black Lives Matter, it was also very unpopular at the same time. Nuance, right? Because what? Two things can be true at once, right? Right? But it was that trendy liberal pop, the popification, the celebrityization. I know that's not a word, but I'm just using that word so that you guys can understand when I say the popification of liberalism. Okay? Okay? Um, that was on the rise. Yet at the same time, we were still going through things globally that were very much reminiscent of the good old boy system. The good old boy system being patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, global anti-blackness, homophobia, etc. And I think that created a bit of a cognitive dissonance for people, and that created friction where people are like, wait a second, if we're living in a post-colonial, post-racial, sex-positive, women-friendly world, then how do we still have all these policies that are doing X, Y, and Z? I thought we were moving forward. That was supposed to be the past, right? So I think that forced people to be like, wait a second, okay, well, there's nuance. Two things can be true at once. And I also think during this time period, intersectionality was coming more into popularity when it came to those intellectual spaces, liberal spaces, and then, of course, social media discourse, especially among younger people. Again, shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw for giving us the term intersectionality. Granted, that term had been around and created prior to this movement, but I feel like it started to get a lot of wings, especially in like college spaces, because I was in college during that time period. I feel like it started to get a lot of upliftment in that, and with that came nuance because they're really together, right? Intersectionality is just, in my opinion, one way of explaining nuances in human social, cultural, and political identities and behaviors and lived experiences. So all of these occurring at the same time, I feel like created the perfect platform, the perfect stage for Nuance to enter into the scene and to strut her stuff. Now, when she first came in, I do think it was for good intentions. I do think it was a way for people to help others understand, hey, history is complex, right? Institutional oppression is complex. It's not black and white because, prior to this, and still currently, black and white thinking has always been the norm when it comes to colonialism, racism, imperialism, patriarchy, etc. White supremacist colonial imperialistic patriarch. You know, the words Miss Bell Hooks would use, would love Bell Hooks, you know, black and white thinking has always been the foundation for that, or a foundation for that, because there's been multiple, there are multiple foundations for that, right? And I think that the whole concept of nuance popping about, especially when it's coupled with intersectionality, was a way for people to be like, hey, y'all, wake up. The reason why things are so complex is because things are nuanced, which means that in order for us to get free from these things, to solve these things, to have restorative justice, we're going to have to need nuanced solutions, because it's not just black and white. It's not just like, okay, this person bad, this person good, take from this bad person, get to this good person. Like, that's not how it's gonna work. We have political processes, we have this, we have different, all that stuff, right? So I feel like that's where it started to gain more popularity. But of course, with the popification of liberalism, the celebritization of liberalism, nuance started to become trendy and less of a radical restorative justice type thing, and became empty. Became empty. And as fascism started to grow, right, because it was just always there, just using the popification of liberalism and, you know, the commodification of it to its advantage, as that was happening, fascism, you know, white supremacy, patriarchy, all that stuff started to build and be like, ooh, we're coming back. These demons, like, yes, yes, And with them coming back, the damage to the term nuance and what it entails had already been done. Already been done. And just as quickly as nuance became popular, with the popification, it started to become unpopular and cringe and social justice warriory, especially as a lot of those populations, especially the younger populations that were so immersed in the popification of liberalism, turned to fascism, because now liberalism became inauthentic and too mainstream and not counterculture and not good. And because nuance lost a lot of its oomph, it was less valued, because it's like, well, how can the world be getting better when there's genocides going on? When white supremacy and anti blackness are on the rise globally? When fascism is here? When women are losing rights, women and femmes are losing rights left and right? Homophobia, transphobia is on the rise. It's like, how can, what is this? But also, due to all those traumas, people are losing their attention spans. Due to those traumas, as well as increased isolation and increased screen time, people's attention spans are dwindling, and they're not able to focus, or they're being overwhelmed. People are being overworked, worked to the bone, worked like dogs. So they don't have time to expand their minds. They don't have time to listen to stuff, especially things that's going to be so overwhelming, because it's like, oh, it's this and that and that and that. And they all interact and talk to each other. All these oppressions are interlinked and work and benefit and profit of each other. What are you talking about? So nothing's going to get better. How are we ever going to? I don't have time. It's not that deep. What are you talking about, nuance? No, it's just black or white. It's not that deep, bro. And all that informs why nuance and how nuance became popular, but also how it's falling. Because she had her day, but now she's slipping. That's a problem. That's a problem. All right, so I just utilized that section to kind of talk about the rise and fall of nuance. So, yeah, the rise and fall of nuance and how we have nuance in our current day. So I hope that made sense for y'all, and I hope y'all were picking up a lot of the analogies and things that I was giving, right? But that's basically, how did nuance become what she is today, right? Now that we've talked about how nuance became what she is today, let's talk about what is she really? Earlier, I talked about how one way to understand nuance is through that common phrase, two things can be true at once. And that is very much fact, right? That is one way to understand nuance. But I want us to take it further because that understanding of nuance, though true, is still very shallow of an understanding of nuance. And if we're going to understand nuance and practice nuance as a concept in its authenticity, in its truth, in its entirety, we have to take it further, especially if we want to utilize nuance as a tool to get free, which we need to utilize it as a tool to get free. We need to. We need to. We're going to have to take it further than that shallow baseline understanding of two things can be true at once. Two things can be true at once. That definition of nuance, that conceptualization of nuance, that's the door. That's the open door to get people in. Now that you're in, let me tell you exactly what's going on. Instead of two things can be true at once, we need to look at it like this: multiple things are always true at once. It's not just that two things can be true at once, two things are true at once. And not just two things, but multiple things are always true at once. That is a natural fact. We can look to nature. We can break down ecosystems and be like, okay, this creature is an apex predator, but that apex predator relies on this minuscule creature that feeds that creature, that gives that creature stuff in order for that apex predator to live. So even though that apex predator may be at the top of the food chain, do they really have all the power? Because if this tiny creature that feeds that and feeds that is gone, the apex predator has nothing. That's just a little natural example to show you how multiple things are always true at once. Everything is connected, interconnected. That's nuance. That is nuance in its true essence, interconnectivity, which means that multiple things are always true at once. But there is a caveat, right? Because even nuance is nuanced. Though multiple things are always true at once, not everything is true to the same scale. And this depends on the context, this depends on the situation at hand. And it's that second part that is truly a skill that we have to develop when it comes to nuance in order to employ it properly. Okay? Now, I want to now give you all an example to further show nuance and why it's important. Because I could talk to y'all about how historically everything in history is nuanced, even when we look at anthropology and cultures and spiritualities, etc., and how all of these things are interlinked and they inform historical movements, which informed the societies that we have today. And in order to reverse certain things, move past certain things, we're going to need a combination of spirituality, history, social political movement, anthropology, cultural expression, creativity, etc., to do all this. I could talk to y'all about that perhaps for hours, but again, this is not a video essay. And even me doing that might lose some of y'all. And if that's the case, that's okay. But I also find that it's often easier to understand things through examples. So I'm going to give y'all an example in which nuance is the star. And with this example, I want y'all to really think. All right? And I'm going to also ask y'all to comment in the comment section below. So let's get into the example. Okay? And with this example, my intention is to show how black and white thinking that is often popular today and has always been popular, unfortunately, is not the truth of a situation and how nuance truly operates. Because nuance is lived experience. Black and white does not exist. It's never this or that. It's always this and that and both and. multiple things are always true at once, but they're true to different scales. So let's get into the example. We have Jenny, okay? Jenny is a 25-year-old woman of African descent. She's a 25-year-old Black woman, okay? And we have Stephen. Stephen is a 25-year-old man of European descent. He's a 25-year-old white man, okay? Every detail I give y'all is important, so pay attention. Jenny murdered Stephen. Premeditated, she murdered him. Now, should Jenny go to jail? Some of you are probably going to be like, yes, lock her up. Okay, you going to prison, girl. Prison night is your new crystal. You are going to prison. So grab your prison night. Tweety bird, you're going to jail. All right? Some of you might be like, wait, but why though? Why did Jenny kill Stephen? She a Black woman, he a white man. Wait a second. We know history. Hold up. What's going on? What's going on? All right? Well, let's get further into the example and the details. What if I told you that Stephen was stalking Jenny for 2 years, consistently making violent threats that he was going to kill her? He was stalking her for 2 years. She went to the police multiple times. And because she was a woman, particularly a Black woman, they didn't take it seriously. And they're like, well, yes, he's threatened, he's stalked, but we can only do something if he actually tries something. He hasn't tried anything, so we can't follow up. She moved multiple times. It's been causing her mental health issues, distress, paranoia. So she finally decided she was going to end her problem. Do you think she should go to jail now? Now, what if I told you that Stephen has a history of mental illness, deep mental illness due to trauma? Stephen was abused severely as a child, mentally, verbally, and sexually. Abused. So Stephen, he's not all the way there. He's not. And Stephen and Jenny had a romantic and sexual relationship. They were together for 5 years prior to this. And Jenny knew about Stephen's condition. She knew about his mental health issues. And unfortunately, during their relationship, Stephen would have violent outbursts, right? Because he felt that Jenny was taking advantage of him. But Jenny would say, no, I'm not taking advantage of you. What are you talking about? But in actuality, Jenny was financially abusing him, taking his money, restricting his money, lying to him about it. But because, he had his mental health stuff, she would gaslight him and all that stuff. And he felt something was off. He felt something was off. But he just couldn't put his finger on it. And after they broke up, he found out she was financially abusing him. So he started stalking her, letting her know that he was going to kill her. And he had every intention to kill her. He made that very clear. And that's the situation, that's the context of this story. Does Jenny deserve to go to jail? And if so, what should her sentence be? How long, if she's going to jail? And you know what? And just to add a little razzle dazzle on the top, Here's another detail. During their time together, Stephen's family was racially abusive to Jenny, and Stephen allowed it, which is why Jenny was like, okay, I'm going to take his money because Stephen had money. And she didn't leave the relationship because Stephen was too possessive. Just a little razzle dazzle there. Now, should Jenny go to jail? I'm not going to tell y'all what I think or what the answer should be. I want y'all to comment in the comment section below. There's no right or wrong answers. Of course, people keep it cute, keep it respectful, keep it insightful, right? But I'm giving y'all this example to show y'all the very real ways that nuance shows up in life and why it's important. Because you see how, in that situation, all the details can truly color a situation and impact a decision. What if you're on the jury? What is restorative justice in this situation? What does that look like? What does that look like? Nuance requires creative and critical thinking. So comment below. What are your thoughts? I have my own thoughts. Um, I'm thinking of them right now, and it is nuanced. It is nuanced. But with that example, I want to now use it to segue into the next part of this episode. And that is the fact that nuanced problems require nuanced solutions. With that example, that hypothetical example, I proposed a nuanced problem. And I've asked you all in the comments to give the solution, which is most likely going to be nuanced. The Jenny and Steven situation is not black and white. In that situation, Jenny is not a perfect victim, nor is she a perfect oppressor. And also, Steven is not a perfect victim, nor is he a perfect oppressor. They are both victims of each other and both oppressors of each other. And that is the fact of life. Very seldom do we find a perfect victim, a quote unquote perfect victim. Now, doesn't mean that we don't. I mean, what comes to mind is like children, cases involving children. But even then, when we do find cases of a victim that's seemingly like a perfect victim, there will always still be those people that try to paint that victim as not and deserving of their things. So, bam, a perfect victim's not going to look perfect to everybody. But also, on the flip side, very seldom do we find a perfect villain or a perfect oppressor. Because even the most evil and wicked people are very kind and loving and tender to certain people. And that person is going to have a different lived experience, truth about that person than somebody who they harmed and oppressed. It's sticky. And that goes back to what I was saying, that multiple things are always true at once, but not every truth is at the same scale. Not every truth is at the same scale. Because even though 5 things are probably true at once, there are going to be some truths that are above others. I know in the spiritual community, they always talk about, oh, it's all about your intention. Intention is everything. Intention is important, but intention being everything is bullshit. Because the road to hell is paved by what? Good intentions. Y'all forgot about that saying, didn't y'all? But also, there's such thing as intention versus impact. You may not have intended to be harmful, but you harmed people. And so does your truth that you meant no harm, that you didn't want to harm anybody, does that matter more to the people who were emotionally or physically, etc., harmed by your intentions, by your actions? Again, it's sticky. But when we practice nuance, when we truly internalize it and practice it, we're able to look at things. It forces us to look at these things and to be like, okay, yes, that's true, and that's true, but what was the impact? What matters more in this situation? I'm going to give y'all another example. Now, this example is also going to be morbid, but it's going to be an extreme example, okay? Let's say we have the town pastor. He's a great guy. He gives money to the poor. Like he's really amazing. He's really amazing. Like empathetic, caring, nurturing, etc. But he's a serial killer and cannibal. Now, he doesn't eat people from his town. He doesn't kill people from his town, but he do be doing it to neighboring towns. And he's sick. He's mentally sick. He has a compulsion. He can't control it. You know, the chemicals in his brain is just not working properly. But he's very kind to people. He's very empathetic. He's very human. You know, he's a humanitarian. But he's a serial killer and cannibal. He sees it as he needs it. If he's tried to go cold turkey, he's tried to stop it every time. He just can't. He can't function. He can't function. That's his truth. He hates it, but he feels a compulsion to do it. And when he doesn't do it, he becomes more violent. So he does it to mitigate that violence within him. That's his truth. That's valid. That's true. And to his community, he's a saint. He's a great person. That's their truth. He's never harmed them. He's only done things to help them. He's overextended himself. But also, to the other communities, because they caught his ass now. They caught him. And they want justice. They want restorative justice. He is a monster. He is a monster who preyed upon their people, killed their loved ones, and ate them. Now, that one's an extreme example, so it's probably going to be more like, well, you know, the solution is probably going to look more like, well, bitch, right? But I'm giving y'all that to show y'all that there's multiple things that are true here. Yes, he was a great guy to his community. Yes, he was, you know, pastor, all that stuff. But he also harmed people. His intention may not have been to harm people. He feels sick. He's not in control of himself when he has these urges. But he still harmed people. The truth that he killed and cannibalized people is above and weighs more than the other truth, than the other things that's true about him. And that's true for him and his community. He could be the only thing keeping his community afloat. And without him, the community may go into chaos. That's true. But he's already sent other communities into chaos. And that's the thing that nuance shows us, that even though multiple things are always true at once, not every single truth weighs the same. And this can change depending on the context, the situation at hand, the people involved, the history. So, what is the solution in that context? With the pastor. Yes, we can say, oh, he's sick, he's this. You know, we could even throw in the spiritual aspect because he is a spiritual figure. And, you know, everything physical is spiritual. Y'all know me. I'm a psychic. I'm the witch. As much as I'm an intellectual as well. But, you know, we could say he was being possessed by an evil spirit. A negative spirit was possessing him. So was he truly in control? Maybe not. I mean, he would probably argue that the devil made him do it because he a pastor. The devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. He would probably argue that. But even if that were the case, he still murdered and cannibalized many people and sent families, communities into disarray. So what does the restorative justice look like, even though his communities campaigning saying, "No, forgive him. Jesus has forgiven him, please." This is nuance in the real world because this is the real world. This is the real world. When we're looking at history, history is not black or white, it is messy. When we're looking at cultures, when we're looking at institutional oppression, so white supremacy, patriarchy, global anti blackness, capitalism, homophobia, classism, etc., these things are nuanced. They're nuanced. And they all are intertwined, but they're harmful. Just like in that example with the pastor, being a serial killer and a cannibal is harmful. It's harmful to not only the person doing the things, but also to the communities. It's a net negative. It is a net negative. That weighs more than the fact that, oh, but it's a net negative, right? Hello. It's harmful. And we know that these institutional oppressions are harmful. They've been net negatives on people, the oppressed and the oppressors, and the physical environment, because everything's connected, right? But they're nuanced. And the way that we would combat against them or find restorative justice through them is nuanced. And that's overwhelming for a lot of people. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to engage with nuance properly, fully, authentically. Because the thing with nuance is that it forces you to not only think creatively, but to expand your creativity, to expand your critical thinking skills, and to expand your empathy. But when we live in a period of black and white, right? That's hard because we want perfect villains and perfect victims. We don't want to see how we sometimes are the villain and the victim, the hero and the villain in our own story. We don't want to take accountability for the harm we've done. We only want to focus on you harmed me. This impacts me. Well, how are you impacting others? How are you harming others? We don't want to wrestle with intersectionality. Okay, we don't want to wrestle with the fact that the trans, femme, queer, white, paraplegic, poor person can be the biggest fascist, racist, imperialist, genocidalist MAGA supporter. Nor do we want to wrestle with the fact that the poor, black, and indigenous woman can also be the biggest white supremacist in the room. But that's life. And if we're going to look at those things and be like, okay, this isn't healthy, we need to get rid of it, we have to understand the nuance and be like, okay, well, how did this person get like that? This thing exists. How do people get like this? But also, how do we move as a community to not only correct this behavior, but do things to prevent it from occurring in the future? That takes labor. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are lazy. Because of everything that's going on in the world, so many people have become so numb to society And empathy, we're at an empathy crisis where there's a lack of empathy and a lack of critical thinking. We're in a stupidity crisis and a cold-hearted bitch crisis. We are. But even then, at the same time, we have a problem where some people think too critically to the point where it numbs them and overwhelms them, and they're just theoretical and not practical in the sense of execution. And then we also have people, especially a lot of religious and spiritual people, and even some liberals, who are way too empathetic. Way too empathetic. And the thing is, in order to practice nuance properly, you do have to expand your empathy, but you also have to expand your creative thinking skills. There has to be a balance. You have to be able to empathize with others and be like, okay, I understand how this situation got like that. I understand this. But also, a thing is a thing. And even though y'all two have your same truth, or all y'all three have your truth, one of these is heavier than the other and needs to be addressed first. Even though both groups were oppressed under the same system, one of those groups assimilated and then started to oppress the other group as well. So, yes, y'all both have traumas, but one of you took it a bit too far. You can insert many real world situations, but I hope y'all catching my drift. So, yeah, it's nuanced, but some things have greater impact, and that needs to be addressed. And oftentimes, the nuanced situation is the most radical, which makes people uncomfortable. But even then, nuanced situations are not going to be as cut and dry. Sometimes they can be very simple, but they're not going to be situations that completely please everyone, even the ones who they're giving the restorative justice to. And that's something that we have to make peace with. All right? Like a nuanced situation quite literally looks like, okay, you're going to have to crack some eggs. You're going to have to crack some eggs to make that omelet. But there's also probably going to be some shell in your omelet, and your omelet might be a little crunchy. It's probably still going to be good as fuck, but it's probably going to be a little crunchy. No one's going to be 100% pleased. We can talk about land giving back and the reparations and all these things in restorative justice, and those things are very much possible. But when you're dealing with nuanced problems, because everything's nuanced and you're making a nuanced solution, you have to understand that, okay, we need to do what's restorative to the ones who've been harmed the most, while also making space for others and understanding that not everyone's going to be happy. You can't please everyone, and that's okay. And that's okay. Okay, the empathy is going to have to expand, but so is the critical thinking and the creative thinking. Because one thing that nuance forces us to do is to get creative. Nuance forces us to get creative, and you got to get creative. Because if you can imagine it, you can create it. Black and white thinking constricts creativity, but pluralistic, nuanced thinking births it out and encourages it. And that's something we need because, again, we are in a critical thinking crisis. The folks is dumb, you know, and that's just the truth. There's a lot of reasons why it's an agenda to purposely make people dumb, but it's the truth. And another reason why I feel like a lot of people either don't engage in nuance or don't engage with it fully is because of that. Is because a lot of people don't pay attention. Because a lot of people's mental capacities have been shrunk. And and it is very much true that sometimes you have to meet people where they're at. Sometimes you can't give people the full nuance, history, and complexities and be like, had this, because You're going to lose some people. Some people's brains, their minds, they're just not there yet at that moment, or they don't have the time because, again, people are being worked to the bone, overworked and overwhelmed. Especially if we're trying to get people for political movement, for voting, for certain things. Like sometimes, they ain't got the time. They just need to know the pieces. But also, if we're going to not only survive this current landscape and what's coming next, because it's going to get crazier, but to thrive, we also have to demand people to expand their mental capacities, to expand their attention spans and their hearts, to hold space for nuance. We're going to need both, because both, utilizing and having and needing both and employing both, is nuance in practice. But also, we're going to need people who can take those nuanced situations, those complex things, and boil them down into their core essences to give them to people in digestible pieces. That's something that I often do. It's something I'm very good at, and I hope I'm doing a good job of it here in this video, which is a bit of a longer video, but hey, it's going to be longer because we're talking about nuance here. And it's something that I do a lot on my podcast and Patreon, the Poppy Walters Grotto Patreon and podcast, you know? And I do a pretty good job of it over there. So y'all should definitely subscribe to my Patreon, be a patron, and join the podcast, subscribe to the podcast as well, because I do have people come back to me and let me know that, hey, the way you explain things, you explain these complex things in ways that I'm able to understand, and I'm able to understand the nuances that you're talking about, because I always talk about nuance in those things because I'm a water spirit. So I live in the liminality. Water is always moving, always changing. It's nuance. That's just how I think. Granted, I came from a very religious, black and white upbringing, and I definitely had that era, but the truth of me, my authenticity is nuance. It's nuance. So I'm very good at taking that and breaking it down to people. But not everybody's good at that, right? So we need the people who can do that. But also, sometimes, depending on the situation and the context, we just need to give people the 1, 2, 3 that they need. And other times, we have to give them everything and demand that they hold space for everything. It depends on the situation. It depends on the context. That's the nuance, but all of it is necessary and going to be necessary. And that's what I want y'all to understand and hold space for and start practicing. Because all of these things are necessary to move forward, because the solution is nuanced. So yeah, sometimes we just got to dumb it down. But other times we have to, you know, kind of ease them in, take the complex thing and boil it down in ways that they can understand, maybe in charismatic ways. And other times we have to be like, no, sit down. We gonna get into this. Because we have got to get a grasp of nuance. We have to. We have got to expand our mental capacities for nuance. That it has to just happen. But there are ways to do it. There are levels, there are stages to do that and to get there. So, that's how nuance is going to save the world. Because all these issues that we're going through, they're nuanced. They are. And we're going to have to sit with nuance, understand it, and allow it to make us get creative to find the solutions. Because there are solutions. Sometimes the solutions are the most radical. Sometimes they're the ones that are the most uncomfortable, that are not going to please everybody. Everybody's going to have to give something. And it's going to require labor. Because even sitting with nuance requires mental, emotional, spiritual, and oftentimes physical labor. But it's possible. Because these institutions, they didn't get erected by just one thing, one person. No. And they're not just sustained by just one thing, one person. No. So how do you think they're going to be taken down? How do you think we're going to build something new? But that is all I have to say. Again, this is perhaps the longest episode I've done here at the Toby Talk. But it's because, again, we're talking about nuance, and we have to demand more people to understand and practice nuance in its authenticity, not in the poppy buzzwordy and not in the half-assed, no, in the fullness. So, bum. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Be sure to leave your comments on the Jenny and Steven situation in the comment section below. If y'all want to learn more and, actually transform your relationship nuance, head to my podcast and my Patreon, okay? Because that, just doing that passively, engaging, that's gonna help y'all. But that's all I got for today. So I'll see y'all next time on the Toby Talk. Have a good one. Quality. Bye.